We're live. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Staying Afloat, a webinar about keeping your mental health and your children's mental health during quarantine. So this is a first in a series of webinars organized by Heal and New You to promote awareness for mental health and provide for people ways to take care of themselves and each other, especially right now. So tonight's webinar will focus on ways in which caretakers and educators can help their children navigate these trying times. We are very grateful for everybody watching today, and we thank all of our wonderful panelists for joining us. So let's begin by introducing them.
You wanted me to start, so I'm Megan O'Brien. I'm the assistant principal at West Windsor Plainsboro High School North. My background is as psychologist as well as a nationally certified and state licensed counselor, as well as having been in the classroom as an English language arts and theater teacher.
Thank you. All right, and then Mr. Cusin.
Sure. So hi, my name is Eric Cusin. I'm the founder of an organization called the Same Here Global Mental Health Movement. Same Here is an American Sign Language sign, like your thumb at your chest and your pinky pointed out at someone else. Was a professional sports executive and then went through a pretty tumultuous lived experience that after coming out of decided not to go back into sports and to focus my efforts on global mental health advocacy. So appreciate you guys having us.
Thank you. All right, Miss Baker.
Hi, I'm Tricia Baker. I'm also founder of a nonprofit. Our nonprofit's called Attitudes in Reverse for AIR. Mental illness is like air. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's all around us. We also developed our nonprofit out of lived experience and heartbreak, but we've been able to educate over 95,000 students across the country about good mental health and suicide prevention. And we include dogs in all of our programming.
And they might make a cameo later in our
We never know.
All right, and lastly, Dr. MC, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. MC, or Rebecca McClellan Crawley, or just Beck to everybody. I hope everybody's having a really, really good day. It was gorgeous weather here in New Jersey, so we got outside and got to play. I have 2 children. I have dogs. I absolutely love being a teacher. I've been teaching for 24 years, teaching science, teaching gifted and talented, both working with 6, 12, and higher ed. I love supporting kids on their journey. I love helping them find ways to have their voices heard and to have them be the problem solvers that they are. So I love working with Heal and New You. They give me and my heart so much joy to see them all and to watch them blossom and change the world. So I'm happy to be here and happy to share my experiences with everyone.
We're happy to have you too. So thank you all very much. And so today we've prepared several questions to guide our conversation. So each question is more tailored towards one of the panelists' experiences and expertise, but all panelists will be able to contribute their ideas on the topic. So after the stream ends today, a replay will remain on YouTube, but also we will be publishing a condensed and captioned version on this channel in the near future. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide live captions at this time. We encourage audience members joining us on YouTube to ask questions and discuss in the chat throughout tonight's webinar. The moderator will be taking care of the chat and reading some of your questions during the audience Q&A session at the end.
Okay, so I think we are ready to begin. Let's begin with Dr. MC. So in general, how can trusted adults like teachers and parents help facilitate tough conversations?
All right, so here's my 2 cents on the facilitating of tough conversations. And it really comes from a place of trying to understand and to empathize, but also to show our human side. When we are as adults, we've had this lived experience and we've made it through a lot of really heartbreaking experiences. And we've survived the breakups and we've survived all of those things. but kids don't have the gift of time. This is all brand new to them. So my thing with any child is to model how we want them to deal with these types of conversations, and to really sit down and just say, like, I'm really stressed out. You can ask the kids on this call, and probably a bunch of them that are watching the YouTube stream. I will usually start our class with, how are you feeling today, right? Like, let's check in. Are we in this zone? Are we in the red zone? What could we do? What can I do? What can this group do to help you calm down a little bit? Because we don't necessarily know everything about the brain, but we can learn about the brain as a family, as a group of people working together. I always advocate for teachers to get to know the brain and to teach, no matter what grade level it is, about the brain, because then it gives everyone an entry point to talk about how their brain might not be feeling great that day, because emotions happen, right? And behaviors and all the things that we want to happen during the school day with long-term learning are affected by our emotions. And the elephant in the room for everyone going back into the school year this year is, it's just not normal, right? We thought in March, a couple months later, everything would be back online and we back in the school buildings. And then it didn't happen over the summer, and we didn't get to have all of our summer vacations. And then September rolled around and we came back into school, but we're not really there. And it's hard. And so I think if the teachers and the administrators and caregivers and everybody working with the kids can just start there and just say, you know, I am disappointed, or I am frustrated that I can't do this right now. And let's find something else that we can do as a unit to make sure that we're going to get through this together, right? It's like showing them, it's not silver lining and it's not toxic positivity, but it's really showing, how do we get through this together? How do we take precautions to get through this? Yes, we're all a little bit more anxious. Yes, people are using, thankfully, the mental health supports that are out there right now. But there's still so much that we could be doing to help our kids understand that we all feel kind of awful right now. Right? It's just not normal, and it's hard to adjust to it. And so we can only imagine the types of things that the kids are feeling. So ask them how they're feeling. Really get to the bottom of it. You know, don't settle for I'm fine, I'm okay. No, how are you okay? Or if they're upset, if they say I'm terrible, have them really describe those emotions. Teach them the vocabulary about their emotions, so that as a family you can sit down and you can discuss, how are you right now? You know, and lots of the things that I recommend and that New You and Heal recommend really come from a lot of the work that we have done with Mrs. Baker and with Attitudes in Reverse, and even with Same Here, and with a bunch of our different friends, of learning about the brain and learning about good mental health, right? How do we maintain good mental health hygiene? So you don't have to have a conversation after the first week of school with your child saying, oh my goodness, everything is horrible. This is why you didn't turn in your work. No, it doesn't have to be elevated to that level. It could be, are you okay? This is stressful. This is stressful for me too, going onto these Zooms. Let's talk about ways that we can take better care of our brain and our mental health as we go through this, because everybody has a brain, so everybody has mental health. And just go through the things of, are we getting enough time outside? Are we spending time with pets if we have them? Do we listen to music? Do we take pleasure in little things, right? Kids don't necessarily need to have all the things, but it's those tiny little moments of joy that make a big difference for them. So I just really recommend that we talk to the kids, we talk to them as honestly as we can. We have good conversations about the brain and about our emotions, and we just connect to them as human beings.
I'm so glad you mentioned about the toxic positivity, because so many individuals are, you want to look to the bright side, and, we do. We want to see, what are the positive sides to an experience. But sometimes that trying too hard to smile through pain, it doesn't provide that authentic moment to really get to the heart of what you're feeling. I was so impressed. I'm fairly new to West Windsor Plainsboro, and HEAL was one of the first groups that said, we want to meet with you. And I was so excited. And so I'm so excited to be here tonight. But one of the things that, just to chime in what Dr. McSee was saying is, you know, we have to listen. And sometimes that means we have to quiet our own brains so that we can listen to others. And, you know, getting to how are we as adults being mindful so that we can be present for students and the people that we support. So yeah, just listening and not listening to respond, and but really to understand, to hear, and to follow up with questions, to take a deeper dive into what's really being said.
That, you know, Dr. MC talking about what she does in class in terms of sharing. I'm stressed right now. You know, so I'll tell a quick little interesting story. We did an event in Port Washington, Long Island, and we're debating, do we allow second and third graders into it, because we were going to start it with fourth graders. And part of the event, when we were discussing, we were talking about the difference of how people react to planes, and we were asking the students, because an airplane is such a great example of how different people can view the exact same object in different ways, right? Some people look at an airplane and they're like, it's a train with wings that flies in the sky that I could relax my seat and eat food and watch TV. This is great. And some people look at an airplane and they're like, I can't get on that thing. It could go out of the sky at any moment. I'm not interested. And I asked that question to the students, not in that way, because you don't want to scare too much, but, you know, to the level of, we had a picture of a blue smiley plane. The cockpit was smiling, and a red mean plane with fangs. And you know, not part of the session, but the teachers, when I asked the question, were raising their hands in terms of whether they felt closer to the blue plane or the red plane. And I remember getting an email after that session from one of the second grade teachers, so the youngest grades that were there. And she said, Eric, I couldn't believe the way that my students came up to me afterwards, because I raised my hand when we talked about the red plane, when you showed the picture of the red plane, and they were fascinated that something could scare me. And I think we take that for granted as adults, that, you know, oh, well, of course, we're people too, right? But, you know, putting ourselves back in the shoes of those young students, sometimes they look at the authority figure and they think, that person's got everything. They're perfect. They're solid. There's nothing wrong there. And I know that's cliche to talk about it in society in general, but when we're talking about school setting, those teachers, oftentimes the children look up to them as everything is in place for them. That's why they're leading this class. And there's a difference between having to share something personal, which that is, all right, sometimes plain scare me, versus something private, right? We don't need to get to the level of private, but when it's something just that's personal, that affects us, like I'm stressed because of this current situation, or like I don't enjoy going on planes myself. She said the way that that opened up conversation then moving forward was incredible. And it, you know, Dr. MC, I know we've spoken to you a little bit about this app that we use to connect students and teachers. Well, the feedback that we got from teachers when they started using it was, give us an opportunity before we ask students how they're feeling, to share with them on the scale how we're feeling. And that was such a cool piece of feedback to get from the teachers. Now, granted, not every teacher is that forthcoming. I get it. So we had to make it optional as opposed to a mandatory piece. But for a teacher to be able to stand up there, and, you know, students here, you guys are the leaders, so certainly chime in if you disagree with this. But, you know, when you hear an authority figure, whether it's a manager in an office or a teacher in a class, and they're willing to share even the slightest bit of vulnerability, that safe space that gets created and allows you all to now share your real self, I think that's so healing.
I was going to add that I think it's important, you know, when we talk to our young people, you know, that we understand that just because they're young, we think that they're all resilient, but, you know, some of them are, and some of them are not as resilient. And what we also have to understand is that our young people, they see the adults struggling. And a lot of our children, from what I've learned, is that they really don't want to add additional burdens onto their family. So they tend to keep things on inside by themselves. So I just think it's important as caretakers, as parents, that we recognize that fact, you know, so that, you know, our child may look fine, but we don't know what they're dealing with. And I just think it's also important too that we talk to children young. You know, our programs also go down. We're actually releasing a program now for kindergartners talking about emotions. It's important that we talk about them so they can identify their emotions, they can communicate about their emotions, you know, with those adults, so that if they are struggling at some point, later on, that they can share that with adults. We want to make them feel comfortable talking about what they're feeling, make sure that they understand what they're feeling.
Definitely. I think, yeah, I think at least I agree with all the points that it seems like everyone presented. And you guys mentioned a lot of things, from things like safe spaces to the idea of everyone having mental health. I actually wanted to draw on that. And this next question is for Mr. Cusin. You know, part of the Same Here movement is the idea that everyone has mental health. You know, you have the hand sign and all that. But I was wondering, my question for you then would be, drawing upon what people have already said, why is it that mental health and being able to be in touch with one's emotions, why is that so important in everyone's lives? Like, you know, regardless of their age or cultural backgrounds or anything like that.
I'm Edward. I'm only laughing because I love your setup over there with the
Thank you.
You look so professional. So, you know, to answer that question, like, my mind always thinks in pictures, right, and analogies. And so the way that we treated mental health historically, you ask, like, why is it important for everyone to think about it? Why is it important not just for the 1 in 5 that we hear about with the mentally ill category, and those of us who've been diagnosed with something to think about it? Let's take physical health now in a bucket by itself and not talk about mental health for a second. If with physical health, we didn't talk proactively like we do in school with jump rope for heart and getting our heart in shape, right? What we would start to do as young adults and then adults is we'd sit around, we'd lay on the couch, we'd watch TV, we'd eat nachos and cheeseburgers and French fries, and we'd enjoy our life, right? Because those things are great and fun and easy to do, right? And what would happen from that? Well, later on down the road, we might develop these things, and likely would develop these things called diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc. So we've learned at a young age, and probably started way before you guys were ever born, with folks like Richard Simmons, if you want to Google that name, or Jane Fonda back in the 70s and 80s, and they got themselves up on a stage and would jump around in, yeah, some wacky looking outfits and stuff, but they changed the perception of what it meant to get ourselves proactively working on our physical bodies. Instead of going to the gym, meaning that it was Arnold Schwarzenegger doing, you know, chest press and building their body in that way, there was a way of keeping our bodies healthy so that we could stave off the things that start to ail our bodies, right? And so when you describe that we all have mental health, Dr. MC had that, and then mentioned that, and then you just mentioned that in the question. Okay, if we all have mental health, then the cheeseburgers, fries, and couch sitting that we can do for our bodies, those are the things. The cheeseburgers, the French fries, and the couch sitting are things like divorce, breakup, job losses, etc. It's cheeseburgers for our brain and our central nervous system. So when we don't work on those things and we allow those things to be a part of our lives and build up and accumulate inside of us, it's like the plaque that builds in our arteries is just like all the stress and trauma that builds in our central nervous system. You want to get into the more complicated piece of it, then once the mental health gets affected, now that also affects the physical health. So now it kind of combines. So, you know, long answer to a short question, but one is, if we're reactive to it, we allow things to build. And I only know that from firsthand experience, that things are going well. I'm happy. I have the job I want. You know, I'm enjoying my friends. And then bam, you hit a brick wall, because we're almost like a Jenga tower that can just topple over when one other thing happens. And that's what happened with me and with my life. And then also, again, the longer term aspect of your mental health impacts your immune system. It impacts the way your hormones are released. When it starts to impact the physical part of your body because of the way that your brain and your central nervous system is being impacted, now your whole system starts, unfortunately, to take an impact.
Love how you've expressed that, Mr. Cusin, because there's so much magical thinking regarding our mental health, that we are just meant to have good mental health that we don't have to take care of on a daily basis. When, you know, when actually we all need, you know, a mental health checkup. We all need mental health support. We all have a time in our life, and you know, sometimes it's for a long stretch, sometimes it needs to be ongoing, whatever the circumstances are. But unfortunately, there has been this stigma about mental health. but we all need to be invested in taking care of our mental health on a daily basis. So I love your analogy about that.
Megan, I'm sorry, I know probably others want to chime in, but I think the road, the intentions that were paved with the campaigns that started when we as a society started talking about mental health, we wanted to make it appear like 1 in 5 is a large number. You should consider this. But the other way to reframe that is we're telling 4 out of 5 people what category do you fall in, right? And if going back to the cancer diabetes analysis, okay, some people can develop cancer diabetes, but with physical health, we don't wait for those things to happen. We go to the gym, we try to eat well to stave those things off. That's why we should be thinking. So I think that there's a campaign piece to this that is the way we've communicated. The intentions were well, but the reasons, it's almost like the stigma that you talk about got amplified because we put everyone in these 2 categories in a binary way, the sick people and the healthy people, and that's just not the reality.
Yeah, so speaking of, like mental health awareness campaigns, um, so the district has acknowledged the need to take care of students' social and emotional well-being, especially during these times. So why is this so important? Like, why now of all times should we acknowledge and address our mental health?
Whenever we're dealing with any kind of change, we are dealing with some kind of loss. And I don't think we always take that into consideration. A really important book, I mean, it was written a number of years ago by William Bridges, but it was called Transitions. And it was largely written for adults going through certain phases of their life, but it really applies at every phase of life. And when we have a change, we're dealing with some kind of loss, even if that change is positive, and coming to terms with that and acknowledging it. Well, at this particular time, the amount of change that we are all dealing with, no matter our age, is incredible. It's impacting us as, the 4 of us that have been invited here as professionals, and how we do our work and how we interact with individuals. And it's created barriers to how we would effectively like to do that work. It's for each of the students on the panel, the impact to your lives, how you're being educated, how you're interacting with friends, how we're even having this panel. This panel, I believe originally there was going to be a presentation back in March before we shut down, and it was going to be in person at High School North, and there were going to be all sorts of, different persons coming to talk about mental health and, and how to support mental health. And you have found a wonderful way to have that panel, but I think we've been dealt such a blow. And we're dealing with so much change that in terms of mental health, we have to find a way that we can all acknowledge the change that we've dealt with, process it, and really mourn the losses that we're experiencing. So if ever there was a time where, as Eric was talking about, we're looking at, gym and health, that we needed to look at mental health, which I'm so thankful the district does put an emphasis on, and the emphasis on relationships. We absolutely have to put an emphasis on this, because each and every person, whether it's a district employee or a student or the families in the community, we have all been dealt an incredible blow across the board, many layers to each part of our life. And we need to come to grips with that and how that's impacting each of our individual mental health. So, that's my 2 cents about why it's just paramount that we're taking a closer look at mental health. It's something we need to do always, but at this point in everyone's lives, it's really dealt us all an incredible blow.
Yeah, when I think about social emotional well-being and SEL and the role that both NUU and HEAL have been playing in the district, it's so important for us to remember that SEL starts with the self, right? So that self-awareness piece and being able to identify how you're feeling, and then that self-regulation piece of, okay, so I am feeling this way. Does that give me permission then to act out in ways that would never, ever be socially acceptable by anyone's standard just because I'm upset, right? So, and it's modeling that then. So going back to the first question of what do we do as the adults in the community is we start with ourselves, like Megan had said, and we really model that for the kids. We use apps like the Same Here app, or we check in with ourselves, or we go back to like the zones of regulation, or we pop on Calm or some other type of an app that's going to have us check in with ourselves and have an authentic conversation within our own bodies of, am I okay right now? Right? Am I overreacting to this situation? Do I need to stop and take some breaths? Would I be better served running around my backyard? Could I go and read a book? Could I go and listen to some really loud music in my car and like scream at the top of my lungs? Like there's lots of different ways to deal with it. My daughter has a destruction notebook, right? Like she's got a way to journal and then she's got a way to tear things up. But that's how we learn how to regulate our emotions. But you can't regulate your emotions without first acknowledging where you are and maybe saying, this isn't the right time for me to speak up for other people. Or maybe this is a really great time for me to speak up on behalf of other people, right? There's lots of different ways that you can interpret what you think your body is telling you. But until we're really connecting with ourselves and accepting that this is the emotion that I'm feeling, and it's not a good or a bad emotion, it just is, right? And it's okay for us to say that to the kids too. Like you can feel really ashamed that you're not doing something or really embarrassed about something, right? We tend to think that if we say we have any kind of, we're off our game that day, that it's a sign of weakness. But like Eric was saying, that vulnerability is a strength. To say that not everything is okay, but I'm working on it. I'm seeing a therapist. I eat healthier. I exercise more. I go for walks with my dogs. I do all the things. And also maybe saying, even with all those things, it's not 100%. And that's okay too. Like you don't have to be perfect in all areas. And who defines this level of perfection? So I think all of that combined together really is about that SEL piece and really getting that message out to the kids.
I agree. I've had so many individuals, whether they be students or teachers, coming in and having raw emotion, tears, and immediately apologizing for it. And I think we need to make sure that we're giving ourselves permission to have those feelings. It's okay to cry. There is a lot to cry about right now. There has been a lot of loss. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel all of those things. We don't need to apologize for them. And, to chime to what Rebecca was saying but making sure that although we're having those feelings, that, we're not lashing out, or we're not behaving in a way that's going to be hurtful to another person.
Those,
I think,
oh, go ahead.
okay, I was just going to say, I think the loss of human connection has been very tragic on our young people. I just in my recent work with some schools, what I'm really concerned about is the fear that our children have, the fear of going out in public, the fear of being close to another human being. I was in a school this week and everybody knows how much the dogs attract students. Almost nobody wanted to touch the dogs. There's so much fear in our young people. And I think we have to get, a message across to them that, we can understand that, we acknowledge it, but then we also have to let them know that, we will get through this, again, respecting the virus, being safe, being cautious. But we have to, I think as an adult, set that example, as Rebecca said, model that behavior of, hope. We will get through this. We work together, we be safe, but we have to start giving children hope. because, as I said, I'm just seeing petrified children and colleges petrified of leaving their homes, college students. And so I'm really concerned for them. But again, there's hope. Everyone, we will get through it. I can't stress that enough. And I know it's a horrific illness. I know a lot of people have died. We know so much more now about it that, we have to try to get back, to as close to a new normal as we can. Again, still being safe. And then also being able to talk about our feelings out loud. As I said, all these children I'm coming in contact with who are so fearful, I don't think they're comfortable talking to some adults, so we do have to recognize that they're living with that trauma. And we also have to recognize that it can take up to 10 years for trauma to take an impact on our mental wellness. So I just see, as adults, as caregivers, for the next 10 years, we have to be very proactive in looking out for the mental wellness of our young people. And young people have to be proactive in looking out for not only for themselves, but for friends, because friends may not want to talk about it. I know kids keep things to themselves a lot. They feel like they can handle it themselves. So we have to be on the lookout so that we can help each other, be kind to each other, and just, as I said, try to give some hope out there that we are going to get through all this.
So it seemed, I'm sorry.
I just want to add on to the last couple of comments, Edward, is Megan, you mentioned transition, right? And so like, you think of transition and how broad transition could be to anything and everything that happens to us in our lives. And then you think about, it goes back to the previous question, where did stigma arise from and how did it happen? Why are people afraid to share? Until this pandemic, okay, most people's transition / traumatic events / stressful events happen to them on their timeline, on their life. This person lost a family member at this time. This person, even a positive transition, which obviously still comes with stress, right? Moving to a new market because they got a brand new job and they love it. That comes with transition and stress. So every transitional period, every stressful, every traumatic period to each of us in the past has felt like this happened to me on my timeline. This happened to Edward on his timeline. That's what contributes to, I'm the only one going through this. I can't share and I can't be open about this. What happened with the pandemic, what has happened with the pandemic, is we're still going through it. It literally is the first time in the history of our planet, okay, that everyone has gone through the same stressor at the exact same time. Probably the closest thing was 9/11. But the reason what makes this pandemic unique is, one, it's global where everyone's impacted. Two, everyone has had to change their behavior and activities in the same way. But three, because of where technology is, we are all connected and seeing what's going on around the entire globe. So even in 1918, right, when you had the plague back then, people didn't know what was happening overseas per se until they got the telegram about it or written in the newspaper, right? So we're all going through the exact same transition / trauma / stress at the same time. And the hope is, as awful as this period has been, Trish, you talking about like now being able to move forward from it. The moving forward from it comes, I think, from there being an understanding and acceptance. Wow, outside factors impact our feelings, impact our actions and our judgments. I get it now. This thing called mental health is not this thing that I'm just genetically born with and either have or don't have. It comes from different things in life impacting us that make those transitions that Megan talked about. So I think that we're going to come out of this stronger and with a greater understanding as a society. And it's very unfortunate that we're going through the losses and the pains that we're going through right now. And that's not to downplay at all the losses that we have had. But my hope is that I think we're going to come out of this as a society in a stronger way than we ever have before.
So that combination that everyone discussed, the combination of the traumas we're experiencing and the hope of being able to improve as a society in the future, that kind of connects to the idea of strategies, like strategies that people can use not just to take care of their own mental health, but also when you see people like educators or parents or even someone's friends being able to find ways to like support the people around us. So I mean, this can really apply to anyone. Maybe like I don't know if Mrs. Baker has anything on coping strategies or anything like that that she may want to share. But if anyone wanted to share, what are some of the methods or strategies for taking care of your mental health and that of the people around you that you found to be the most applicable?
Well, I will say there were some positives for me that came out of this, and I try to get people to look at what are the positives. And even as I said, I was in a school the other day, and one of the positives I noticed was, I always ask the question, who gets 8 or more hours of sleep? And most of our young people do not get 8 hours. And then at West Windsor Plainsboro, when I ask the question, who gets 5 or less, at least a quarter of the hands go up. So I was very happy to see that many more students are getting 8 or more hours of sleep now. I think because everyone's taking, like a slower schedule, they're not booking quite so many activities. They have to be home at a certain time. They're able to do their homework more. So that really made me feel good to see, because I do believe that lack of sleep is really important. Is detrimental to mental wellness. For myself, I've been able to sleep more because I'm not in schools every day. So that's really helped me. I've been able to get out. We go for walks with the dogs, get outside is really important. Having hobbies, something to keep you mentally stimulated that you enjoy doing. I think our young people, if you keep your brain moving, your body moving, you stay active, involved, you're not going to be dealing with that boredom, that can bring you down and put a stress on your mental health. So, and just staying connected with each other. I have at least a dozen people in my life that I will shoot them a text message, because I know they're very vulnerable, and I stay in touch with them just to make sure that they're doing okay. So I just think that's really important. Again, this is a great way, virtually staying connected, but we are missing that human connection. I'm a hugger. I think I've said to Rebecca, I hug everybody, and you can't do that anymore. And so one day we'll be doing it again, but we have to stay connected in other ways, and through either text or talking on the phone, that old fashioned talking on the phone. As long as we check in, see if they're okay. And if you feel like someone's, telling you they're okay, but you really feel they're not, call them on it. I've had a couple people where I've actually, I said, are you thinking about suicide? Because I wanted to make sure that I gave them that opportunity, that if they were thinking about it, that I gave them an easy way to say yes, without having to give a long explanation. I want to make it as easy for them. And thank goodness nobody was. But, it's okay to say that question to people. It's okay. If they're not thinking about it, you're not putting the idea in their head. But if they are thinking about it, it makes it easy. I will tell you, just real quick, the first time Kenny, my son, went to the hospital for his mental illness, we had no idea he had a mental illness at the time. I knew he was just acting erratic. And I said, Kenny, we have to go to the hospital. He came up, he got up and he walked with me. He wanted help. So it's important to know that people who are struggling want help. So sometimes we just have to make it easy for them to accept that help. But I think staying connected is the most important thing at this time.
I'm so glad to hear that you're hearing more positive responses regarding sleep, because I know certainly when we went virtual back in March, everything was based on this emergency, and so even the way that the school day was structured, it was students didn't necessarily need to check in or be with their teacher at that moment in which they were teaching that class, and there was a lot more flexibility. And I think it was absolutely the right thing to do, but I also think there were some issues that didn't support mental health in terms of structure, because structure can be so important. So now students do start their day at a specific time, and part of their attendance is being present and engaged at a certain time and moving through the schedule of their day. And I think that helps a great deal, just giving yourself some structure. Some of the mindfulness things I know that work for me. I'm a huge fan of Headspace, and I use it daily, and it has really changed my life. It's changed how I breathe through moments. It's impacted the function of my brain when I'm under stress. And I think everyone needs to find what is that something that helps them manage that stress, manage their brain. So the brain isn't taking over you. You're more or less, working with your brain. And certainly meditation, using, Tricia mentioned the app Calm, Headspace. There's all sorts of things on YouTube and online that you can find. But going for a walk, we're on this screen most of our school day. Getting away from the screen, I think, is really important. Getting out into nature. And if you have pets, I have 2 dogs. So, getting out and walking them, finding an exercise that you like to do, listening to music. There's all sorts of strategies, but that connectedness, those relationships. So one of the things that I would suggest for those students particularly, and those parents that are listening, is one of the things that I hear from teachers is that students aren't turning on their cameras. And I completely get it. The only time we mandate that is for attendance, so that we know that the right person is actually in the Zoom room with us. But I'd encourage parents and students to have a dialogue about that, because there's a loss of connection in that. And while there's a lot of reasons to not have your camera on, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important that be student choice, but I think it's a conversation worth having, because sometimes being that anonymous person in that room, if that's the way that you're connecting with your classmates, with your teacher, within your school day, it limits your connectedness in that moment, in those moments throughout your day. So I think it's something to really reflect upon, and to have a dialogue with your parents about, and with your teachers about, and your fellow classmates. It's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, I think the connectivity piece is huge. So thank you for bringing that up. Megan is even on the presenter side of things, you do these sessions with schools or with companies, and I'll tell you the biggest, I'm going to say this in the nicest way. I was going to say perpetrators of that, but the folks who take advantage the most of not going on the camera are often the adults in the office setting, because the excuse is they're multitasking, right? And they've got other things that they're going on while they're watching. As a presenter, it's really hard because you feed off of that's why I'm missing so much being in schools or being in offices, because that human interaction that you can have and reading someone else's reactions to what you're saying, that gives you validation of whether or not what you're saying is working or not, whether you need to tweak the message or not. And I think, now bring it back to the student side of things. If you're off camera, I know you to your point, you want flexibility because you want to be able to respect people's privacy, that there might be things going on in the background. The dog might be barking, the parents might be yelling, right? Or you're just ashamed of what the back of the house looks like. I get all that stuff. But there's also a piece of it that when you don't show yourself on camera, you could lay in your bed and be on in class while you're laying in bed. There's a piece to that where you don't feel as present. You don't feel like you're in the moment. You don't feel like, okay, I'm in a classroom setting right now. And so it's, to your point, it's not something you mandate, but can you challenge people to do it so that it makes them feel like they're more involved in the process of what's ever being taught? And then, back to the specific question that was asked about, things that we can do from a proactive standpoint. I'll go back to the physical health analogy. If you know, because Megan, you were mentioning a number of different options, right? Whether it's Headspace or Calm or different apps or going on YouTube. If someone went to a physical health gym, right, and 24-hour fitness, New York Sports Club, whatever it is, Gold's Gym, you would see a treadmill, an elliptical, a universal machine, a weightlifting, you know, different free weights, kickboxing, boxing, swimming. There's all these options for the ultimate goal, which is being in the best physical shape you can be in, depending on what your physical goals are, right? But with mental health, we haven't educated our society yet as to the understanding of what all the options are that are out there. And so what I would just encourage people, we call it STAR, stress and trauma, active release and rewiring, these set of different practices that I had no idea existed. So I'm considering myself public enemy number one, that when I was sick, I waited for a pill to kick in to make me feel better, and it didn't work for 2.5 years. And then when I healed through learning breathing practices, my mind went to, well, what else is out there besides breathing practices that help us heal? And was fortunate enough, I wouldn't have been able to do this on my own, but got scholarships to go to Jakarta, Indonesia, to learn about Qigong meditation and learning about something called havening, which involves self-soothing methods, and something called TRE, where we induce this tremor response that animals have to be able to release the trauma from traumatic events physically out of our system. Is that different things are going to work for different people. So if those of us who are all on the call went to that physical health gym, each of us would probably take to a different exercise that we felt like worked better for us. And even over the long haul, maybe switch between exercises, because that running thing I was doing before doesn't seem like it's having as much of effect anymore. I want to do high intensity free weights and get my heart rate up that way. We would switch between. So what I've noticed is, while the breathing worked for me well to get me out of a bad place I was at for 2.5 years, I then started going in a down period again. I had to start doing more yoga heart opener exercises, right? And my friends laugh when I say that, because they're like, here's a 6'4" dude who played sports, he's doing yoga? Like that's really, but that's where I think the acceptance and the education, the understanding of, there's a set of practices, just like there's a gym for the body, there's a gym for a brain, and we can go and we can try different things and vacillate between them. That's what's going to keep us healthy throughout the course of our life.
Yeah.
I want to mention some of the things that we've talked about in PRISM, which is the program that we run over at Community Middle School and Grover Middle School. When we were talking with the students and then with staff members, and even some of the students that were a part of an equity conference, is about those adverse childhood experiences, right? And we'd be really naive and completely not validating the experiences that we're all having if we were to say that this is not traumatic for many people, right? And so we have millions of children who at some point, like we've all said on this call, maybe 10 years from now, will start to exhibit some of these symptoms from having these adverse childhood experiences. And it could be from isolating, it could be from losing a family member, or losing a friend, or losing a teacher, right? And so whether they're showing it now or they show it in 10 years from now, that's on us, right? So we don't have a second chance with this group of students. We have completely waited way too long, in my opinion, for many communities. I feel really proud of West Windsor Plainsboro. Like, I've got my WWP proud, our WWP strong shirt on, right? Of we've worked really hard to make sure, we're gonna miss some things. We might miss sports, we might miss the play, we might miss certain events, but our job as the adults is to make sure that we understand that in perspective, we're all gonna get through this together. Right. And as the adults, we remind the kids, we're going to get through this together. And this is one thing that everybody in the world, like Eric is saying, everybody in the world is set back a year. It's okay. We're not in a race. We have to stop. The keeping up with the Joneses died with coronavirus. Just stop trying to have this race for your kids to be at the top, for us to be at the top, for us all to do this, when we know that this is only adding to that stress for our kids. And they don't want to come to us because they feel like we're adding, like we said, the kids feel like they're adding additional stress onto their parents. They see everything, they hear everything. They know, as the caregiver that you are feeling stressed out. They don't want to come to
I
you
can,
to burden you with anything else.
I just want to jump in, Rebecca, real quick, because I love everything you said. And the whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses ended with this pandemic. Maybe that's a good thing. You know, I think too many of our young people are just trying to, again, it's for, pleasing themselves, pleasing their parents, do this. They're involved in so many things that's not good for their mental wellness. They have so many things on their plate. That's what's keeping them up at night, where they're not sleeping. So I just think that maybe it's a good thing. We have to look at where the positives are. And I think that's maybe one of the positives.
Absolutely. I have said to anybody that will listen, and you all know me, the ADHD is strong with me and with my family. I am type A. I want to be at everything. I want to contribute to everything. I feel like, it's not like a YOLO, but it's definitely like I've got to make my mark and change the world as much as I can kind of inspiration. But there are times I'm like, wow, I don't want to go back to all of those things that we were doing. It feels nice to slow down and just be able to sit down and have dinner and not have someplace to run to.
Yes.
So that's something that we could do as a coping strategy, right? Of just like, what can we take off of the plate? Because you have this allostatic load. You keep putting things into that book bag or onto that plate. Eventually, we're all going to be too weighed down by all of it. So we have to remove some of the things that don't bring us joy. I always tell the kids, do the things that bring you joy, right? If I can be that one person that is telling you and is advocating for you to advocate for yourself, to do those things that bring you joy. And it could be as mundane as it needs to be, right? Just bananas and Nutella. If that's what brings you joy, go when you're done with virtual schooling, have some bananas and Nutella, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to find some joy in that. But like we were all saying, the different coping strategies are different for each person, right? And they cause our brain to release the hormones that we need, right? Because this is all a game against biology, and you don't win against biology. You have to learn how to work with biology. It's what I loved about being a biology teacher is there's so much that we can teach kids about their bodies and how they operate to know, like when we're stressed, we're releasing cortisol. We're trying to get out of harm's way. It's how we as a species have evolved into these super creatures that we are, right? So we need those things to help us get out of the way. I finally did find a steamroller on my street to take pictures with it, because I always say, like, if a steamroller is coming your way, you've got to get out of the way. And I always said, like, I don't have a steamroller. Why would a steamroller be there? And there they were on my street. So I took pictures with it. But it's like that steamroller moment of like, you're being steamrolled by all of these things that you're taking on. We've got to take some of those things off, right? Because we've got to calm that amygdala, like that flipping the lid where the amygdala is releasing all of those hormones. It's a cocktail to protect us. But at the same time, the cocktail that your brain really, really wants is to feel that connectedness, to feel that love, to feel that nurturing. And we get that with human connection. We get that with exercise. We get that with a healthier diet. We get that when we are in communication with at least one close friend, right? We don't have to have all the friends in the world, but when we've got one or two really close friends that we can check in on, that's what really makes a difference for all of us.
Yeah, there's a great opportunity, this slow time for ourselves, but also the slow time we get to redefine for ourselves, but we also get to redefine with our families, have a very explicit, conscious conversation about how we're going to be with each other. And, Rebecca, you were talking about what brings us joy as an individual, but what brings us joy as a family, and how are we going to preserve that and structure that going forward. So there are some wonderful opportunities here.
Right. So kind of this conversation that we've been having kind of transitions into some of the questions that our sister group at New You had for you all today. So I'd like to introduce Tristan, who is representing New You for us tonight. And he is going to ask a couple questions from them. So I'll hand it over to you now, Tristan. no, there might be some technical difficulties. So that handing over might take like 30 seconds.
It looks like he's muted.
Are you there now, Tristan? All right.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
All right, so go ahead.
All right, so yeah, so I'm a part of the sister group New You, which is also another mental health club that basically talks about strategies. And another part of those strategies is definitely when it comes to the environment. So one question for all of you guys would probably be, like, so we talked about all these things that for students to help themselves, but how can we also focus on that like classroom environment, specifically with educators, especially with virtual too, as that's also been something that's kind of been difficult for a lot of students.
Well, I will say that I am, it's one of those like disclaimer moments of I'm kind of weird and quirky, right? And I think that that works for me. And I think being authentic of who you are with your class is how you're going to build that classroom culture. And I always say to them, like, you can let your freak flag fly in here, right? You want to be as weird and as strange as you are. We love you and we accept you for who you are. And I think that also goes back to that earlier discussion we were having about the cameras, right?
Yeah.
The cameras come on for so many of the kids during Prism because there's an understanding that we're family, that we check in with each other. I do check the kids to make sure that they're checking in with each other. I check in with all of them. They check in with me. Like when I told them that I had COVID, oh my God, the can I send you a care package? I'm like, it's okay. Like I'm just a little nauseous. It's all right. Like I'm gonna be all right. But it's that you build that environment where everybody feels like that's a family, right? And you don't get that by starting with curriculum first. You start that with kid first. You start that with, I'm connecting with you all individually and as a group. We are going to get through this together. And that happens every school year, right? That's not just a COVID situation. Sharon, I know you're nodding and everything, but you and Kabir, like you were there. Zachary, you were there. Like, you know, we check in. Edward, like, how many times is this group like on different group chats and checking in with Zooms? We had Trish Baker with the Pomeranian on a lap so that we could have tips for taking care of our mental health when she was available to come into the school. And then we were doing it via Zoom, right? Like that sends the message of we're taking care of ourselves together. And I'm not going to let you on my watch fall into a trap of thinking that you don't belong here, that you are not valued and seen and respected and heard, that you can't contribute to this group. And I think that's when those cameras really do come on and you get a fully engaged student. And like I've shown them, like my house is a disaster. I am like that mom that takes holiday pictures where everything has to get pushed to the side and everything. Like, we can't let them know that we are human beings. There's dirt on the floor from the dogs, right? I was like, look, it's a mess. It's okay. Not everything has to be perfect. We're holding ourselves to such ridiculous standards that we've got to try to connect with each other. I love the way that New You has worked with staff members and that Heal has worked with staff members too, to have those conversations, to say, we know that you're afraid to say something wrong, but we'd rather you just talk to us as humans, right? And I think sometimes we forget as educators that we don't have to be perfect at everything, right? And as adults, we don't have to be perfect at everything. It's better to just be average than to not talk to kids about something because you're afraid of making a mistake.
The history, the way this was spoken about in schools, I think, Megan, you'll probably, I know you're about to chime in there, like you'll appreciate this. So my parents were both educators, and my father was a principal and mother was a language teacher. And I've had these conversations with them going back to, look, I think New York State was the first state to require mental health education, and it was July 11th of 2018. So we're still in the infancy stages of what mental health education looks like. So when we talk about culture in a classroom, right? Like for for all the students that are on the line, even before pandemic happened, before you guys were all in school, here's how we learned about mental health. There was a guidance counselor in school, one person, or there was multiple guidance counselors if we were lucky. That was the title. There weren't school psychologists, there weren't pupil support personnel groups, there was none of that stuff. And we didn't discuss how anyone was doing other than if you were a bad kid, you went to the guidance counselor. So a bad kid meant the person who acted out in class, or they kind of knew there were problems going on at home. And so there was a drug problem at home, or there was a relationship problem at home. And so what we were trained to believe is, again, going back to this concept of these binary categories, take illness out of it for a second, you were either the bad kid or the good kid. Something Trisha mentioned earlier, like in being the good kid, like, okay, now there's this pressure on you to be the good kid because now that you've been perceived as the smiley, happy kid, well, wait a second, you're the people pleaser. You're the person who always has to be the happy kid. You're not expected to ever have anything wrong with you. And I think, the reason why we use a scale, and it sounds like there's some usage of mood meters and stuff like that, is as teachers, what we can do in classrooms is lay the foundation that all of us fluctuate up and down, whether it's a scale, whether it's a mood meter, whatever the tool is that we use. And the fluctuation is something that happens to all of us. This way, the kid who would have in the past been the bad kid knows that they're not stuck in a place that is bad kid central. And that's they're locked there. But also the kids who are the smiley, happy, good people pleaser kids know, hey, I can fluctuate up and down also, and I don't need to be this perfect individual all the time. And having challenges is okay. And when you present from a cultural perspective at the beginning, when you're bringing your students and your classes together and say, all of us could be anywhere on this scale or this mood meter at any given point throughout the entire day that we talk about it, even hour that we talk about it, and it could fluctuate from hour to hour, minute to minute. That gives permission to everyone else to be like, wow, okay, I get it now. I can be anywhere on there, and it's not about the good and the bad, and we're all checking in with each other. And so, I think it's awesome hearing all the stuff with the check-in piece. With the check-in piece, also letting the students, not people, the students understand this is something that has many ranges and many different places to it. It's okay on given days, things are going to change. That's why we're talking about it.
I think
Yeah.
Eric, when you started to talk about the school counselor, I can't tell you how many people would send me a student and essentially be saying fix them, and that's not how it works. No one is meant to fix anyone. We build a relationship and we walk alongside them. It's all about working with, and like Rebecca, you talking about creating a family. I'm a huge proponent of restorative practices and, the circles. And so you don't even get to the curriculum piece of it until you've developed that cohesive sense of community and family, because then everyone has a voice, everyone feels safe, and that's when education begins. So, listening to you talk about your classroom, Rebecca, it's wonderful. And, and Eric, you talking about, some of the constructs in which people think about, mental health in the school setting is not in line with what's really needed in the classroom. We need to create community relationships, then we educate.
All right.
Just
So
to jump
we
on,
are-
could I just
okay,
jump
go
on
ahead,
to
go
what
ahead.
Eric said also too, is just, education is key, because we didn't really talk about mental health 10 years ago or mental wellness, and we judged people by their behavior. And I think the more we educate educators and understanding that children don't choose to be bad, to do bad things, that their behavior might be a result of an illness, to have, teachers be a little bit more open-minded, as well as having students be more open-minded about their peers, so that there's less judgment and then more kindness and empathy. So just education is really key, I believe.
Okay, so we seem to be running very low on time. I do apologize, Mrs. O'Brien, but before we end this, I would like to have the rapid fire question time. this means that you have like 30 seconds to answer each question. All right, let's start with Mr. Cusin. Can one of the questions in the chat was about burnout. Can you quickly talk about kind of how to deal with that and like your experience with that?
Yeah. Think of burnout as if we're filling a pot with water. Burnout is when water gets too far to the top and it starts spilling over. So how do you suss that water? It's the stressful and the transition type of events that Megan was talking about. The water is not going to stop coming in the top of the pot. So what we need to do is we need to create a release valve at the bottom of that pot so that water is going out quicker than what it, but the restorative practices are exactly that. That's why we call it STAR, stress and trauma, active release, rewiring. The meditations, the yogas, the mindfulness, in order to come out of that pot so the line doesn't get too high, so we don't go through burnout.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Miss Baker, can you quickly give us some like classroom strategies, like things you would do like right before a test if you're feeling stress, or something like that? What are some things you can do to help yourself feel a bit more calm before you
Well,
go through that stressful event?
yeah, deep breathing exercises. I really believe in that, just help just empty your mind. I also believe, if you have something that you're really stressed over, write something down on a piece of paper. I always say when you write things down, it leaves your brain and it's on that paper. So, or even just write for yourself these positive affirmations, that you will do good on the test, or, I've done the best that I can in studying and I am prepared, and, whatever will be, just trying to let go. Again, I breathe. And when you breathe out, you let go of all that anxiety and that pressure that you might feel inside of you before a test.
So then, Mrs. O'Brien, how would you say to develop, like in our district, I feel like a lot of students see their guidance counselor as this is the person you go to for college applications. This is the person you go to for your letter of recommendation, or because you want to take a specific class. How do you develop that good relationship with them so that way they can better understand you as a person, so that way you aren't only going for them for academics, but also that you trust them for your social emotional learning?
Well, I guess I'd almost answer that with a question. What can the school counselors be doing that would help students see them in a broader sense so that they aren't just, dispensing the recommendation? What on our end do we need to do better so that perhaps students see them differently? And see that they are more than just a college recommendation, changing of classes, talking about which college to attend, because they are a greater resource. They can assist with mental health. They can assist with kind of looking at, what are some mindfulness practices that might work for you, or, how might you better structure your approach to time management, to to the structure of your day, to even your growth mindset, your patterns of thinking. And so I would turn that question back to you, because if that's how the students are seeing school counselors, I think that there's more work for then the counselors and for the administrators and for the school to do, so that they are viewed differently and viewed as a greater resource than just those things.
So if you don't mind me chiming in here, Megan, the interesting piece of this is that question and the analogy of those two. So working with pro sports teams, the NBA and the NFL have required mental health professionals be hired by the teams. The players will not go to those mental health professionals right now, a year into that practice. Why is that? Because they look at those professionals the way that students look at previously the guidance counselor. That's the person I go to when this problem arises or I have this exact thing I need. So to take the pressure off you on that question a little bit, because it's a tough question to answer, because I think the administration, and I know AIR does this a lot with West Windsor, the administration has to bring in resources that allow the mental health professionals, the guidance counselors, the social workers, the school psychologists at the school to be looked at by the students as a safe place that's based not on disorder, not on college application, but based on life. That's why the positioning of mental health generally about the transitions and the things that we go through, laying that foundation helps the students then understand what the mental health professionals are there for. If not, the preconceived notion of what am I going to do and talk to that person right now? A, I don't want to be labeled if I go and talk to that person. B, this is their specialty. Doesn't seem like it's what I'm dealing with, so I don't need to go talk to them about it. So that culture bridge type of session is needed with the students and the teachers, the administrators together with the school professionals. If not, that culture doesn't change and the students continue to see the school professionals in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you both. And then finally, Dr. MC, how can we, I know you covered this just a little bit before, but like, if we, how do we find, basically, how do we find that trusted adult in our teacher, in our parent, in our guidance counselor, in someone that, you know, is a responsible adult in our lives? How do you feel like as a teacher we should be like inviting towards that, but then also as a student to kind of feel like kind of how to look for that?
So this is complex, right? Because on one side, I want to be able to honestly tell you that every adult that you come across is always going to know what to do. But the reality is we're not, right? We're not all going to know what to do. And our own judgments on ourselves and the way that we view whether we are capable of helping a child and what we're going through at that exact day that a kid comes to us may influence it. What I do tell kids is to go to at least 5 people. Right? If you're having a rough day and you need to talk to somebody, you just keep going from person to person to person until you find somebody who sits, right? Yeah, that 5 people of like,
yep.
Just keep going. If the first one leaves you feeling like this didn't work, like I didn't have a connection with this person and I don't think I was heard at all, go on to the next person. Just keep working your way through. I will also say, you've got to reach out to the adults. If you're in a home where mental health is not discussed, like it's very common. You're not alone if mental health is not talked about in your home. But we have lots of teachers in West Windsor Plainsboro, lots of teachers in many school districts and administrators and counselors that can connect you with someone who can help, right? And it's not just about connecting with somebody to help you if you have a mental health issue. Right? Because you could be going through lots of different things where you would need to make a connection with an adult who can steer you in the right direction if your family has lost a job or a home, or you need to talk about a pet, right? You want to be able to have somebody to reach out to. But I'm asking you as an educator to try to make those connections too, right? Reach out to the adults. I would ask that you think that in our heart of hearts, most educators went into this profession because we are nurturers and we love and we care about kids, right? We're very pro kid in this profession. And we want to help you, but sometimes we can't know who needs help and who needs that extra person to talk to. So reach out to us, right? If we say something that really flips up something in your mind, like, oh, that was really interesting, and come back and talk to us, build that connection with us. You know that I'm seeing like 225 kids over the course of a week, and I couldn't possibly know what every single one of you is dealing with. And it's the same at all different grade levels, right? So we want to connect with you. We want to know, like when I saw Kabir for the first time this school year, and went, how did you go from our little mindfulness expert and doing yoga to having a full beard? When did that beard come up, right? And you laugh because it's like that connection of just knowing your kids. But we want to get to know you. This is harder for us to get to know you in this environment. So go out on a limb and start reaching out to your teachers too, so that we can build those relationships with you as well this year.
If I can just add one thing too, in regards to teachers, I know I've talked to a lot of teachers who they feel nervous about being approached about this topic. It's not that they don't want to be approached, but they're really afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. You know, so I think that's part of what has to get across to teachers is that, you know, all you have to do is listen with compassion and connect them to a counselor, because we don't expect the teachers to be counselors. We just expect them to listen with kindness. And so we have to kind of get some teachers, I think, past that feeling, that apprehension.
Yeah. Okay, I'm very, very sorry, Miss O'Brien, for keeping you this long. One final question.
No, please, you're absolutely fine. I know I had originally said that I had a hard stop time, but that changed. So
Okay.
I don't want you to worry.
Okay, so we got this question in the chat. So in a time of the pandemic where students are more likely to reach out to their friends compared to adults, how do you know when to say, kind of to stop and to kind of say, I'm not the therapist, and to pass them on to someone else? How do you kind of do that?
I think whenever someone is voicing to you that, that they are in distress and they're thinking about harming themselves or taking some drastic steps. And often that will be said in a way, but don't tell anyone. That is never a secret to keep. That is never, ever a secret to keep. You've got to listen to your gut and listen to what they're saying. If they're talking about really feeling at a loss, truly struggling, not knowing what to do, talking in a temporary way that causes concern, anything that might cause you to think that they are at risk of hurting themselves, you've got to come to an adult. And yes, that person may initially be upset with you, but it will be worth it because you will have kept them safe and saved a life. So that is never anything that you should try to handle yourself. If you think about it, even if something plays out at school, we work in teams because that it is no small thing when someone is in distress. And so by working in teams, those teams get to lean on each other. Well, if someone is coming to you and they're sharing that they're not sure that they can take it, or they're talking about feelings of harming themselves, that's the signal that they need help, and you need an adult's help, because there are certain things that an adult can access and steps that they can take that that a student may not be able to take. So take the risk. Recognize that person, yeah, they may be upset, or they may say, I'll be so angry if you tell anyone. That is anger worth facing, because that person's life, that person's safety is paramount.
I wanted to add in, one of the reasons why New You and Heal have been trying to get training for themselves as teenagers on the mental health first aid is because they know that their friends are coming to them, and they want to spread not just what they know and what they've been taught by the Bakers and by Dr. Matt Zakreski and working with Same Here. They really want to make sure that they, just like we were saying with the teachers not knowing what to do at certain times, not wanting to make a mistake, they know that their friends are coming to them. They're texting them, they're sending them, or they're putting things onto Instagram, or they're putting something on TikTok that sends off a warning that they know in their gut something feels wrong, but they want to have that credible evidence to say, no, I learned this, right? My friend seems helpless. They seem hopeless. They're giving things away. They've said goodbye to me and now they're blocking me, right? Like those are the signs that we really want to look for with our friends, but we've got to check in with them, right? A lot of the times it gets to a point with our friends, that are in a really rough place, that they isolate themselves more and more, right? So almost to make it impossible to receive that help. So definitely one of the things that I would recommend is that we can get as many of our students as possible trained in mental health first aid so that they know how to help each other. And that part of that training is that warm handoff. Part of that training is understanding that you are not the therapist, right? And making sure that they get the help and the support that they need. And that might also be a family member, getting the help that a family member needs, getting the help that a cousin needs, getting the help that a parent or a guardian needs. You have that training under your belt. We do this. How many of you know, like in our high schools, we do first aid training for people, right? You can go get CPR certified. We need to have that same level of training available for students that want to take advantage of it for mental health training as well.
Agreed. I've had so many students come forward to me and say, but I feel bad telling you. And I make it very clear, you are this person's hero. When you come forward on behalf of your friend or an acquaintance because you have a concern, you're their hero. So
I'll tell it from the perspective of someone with a lived experience of understanding what a suicidal ideation feels like, because it came to me what felt like out of nowhere. There was nothing that had happened in my life, the 2.5 years that I was going through what I was going through, that was traumatic and stressful. We've talked about this 10-year potential timeline. So I hadn't been through a bad breakup. I hadn't lost someone in my family. And I remember waking up one morning and looking at this bottle of pills on my counter, and I couldn't stop myself from thinking, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. It was like this error message is what I describe it, that was going through my brain. And I had, I call it like 8% of my brain was still rationally thinking at the time. And so I was able to counter that irrational thought by being able to reach out for help and asking for that help. And so for anyone who's wondering, like, am I telling on my friend if, or my family member, if I'm seeing possibilities of self-harm, or they're talking about self-harm, am I telling on them? I'm repeating what Megan is saying, is that error message that's going through the mind of that person who's dealing with that, that's not a thought that they want to be having at that time, that self-harm thought. It's something that if they were able to step out of themselves in that moment and rationality was able to just magically come on them, they'd say, why am I thinking this, right? So what you're doing is you're doing them a great service by getting them help, even though it sounds like in the moment they might be resisting and say they don't want to get it, because I can promise you that person doesn't want to be feeling those things. It's just their brain is in such an awkward, weird place at that point, they can't stop those thoughts from happening.
Well, if I could add, I'll share our lived experience and story of my son, Kenny. I don't know if all you know, but we lost Kenny to suicide. He died on a Tuesday morning, and that Monday he didn't go to school. He said goodbye to every single one of his friends. It wasn't until after he died that at least a dozen young people said, Mrs. Baker, I had a bad feeling, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to get Kenny in trouble. I didn't want to get Kenny angry at me. So if you have a bad feeling about someone, you must say something to someone. And just in regards to the question too, is that you always have to think of your own mental wellness. So if you have a friend who's, or friends, multiple friends, to sharing all their negative feelings and their thoughts of harm, you have to also put a stop to that. You have to seek help for yourself to make sure that you're not walking around carrying everybody's burden, and holding it in. So you need to be able to talk about it. And you also need to be able to make sure you connect your friend to, a counselor, so that they can talk to their counselor and you don't have to be their counselor. No young person should ever be accepting that burden of being their friend's counselor.
On that note, we would be remiss, given we did discuss suicide and suicidal ideations. We would be remiss not to mention some numbers and lines that people can contact if they do need help, if they are feeling this way, or if they're concerned that someone that they care for is feeling this way. We have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. And then there's also the crisis text line, and you can text home or help or anything like that to 741-741. We just wanted to put that out there just in case that would be of any use to anyone. But then also we once again, of course, we wanted to thank all of the panelists for being here today, sharing your experiences. We did go. We're bordering on 1.5 hours right now, but honestly, I think it's worth it because of all the things that everyone was able to share and all the things that we were able to take away. But we just wanted to share for everyone watching today the social media handles for each of these panelists on Twitter. You can stay in touch with them on Twitter. And of course, we also have the information for the HEAL team and the New You team in case you want to stay in touch with us. And we love being in touch with people. And I'm sure the panelists here today would love to get in touch with you as well. And also, we say this because we mentioned at the start, this is going to be the part of a series of webinars with New You, our sister group, and you had Tristan from New You earlier helping us out, and we'll be doing the same for them. So if you follow us on social media, stay in touch with us, you can get updates. We'll be posting updates as we continue this series of webinars to discuss these important topics, because I think we all know that we need to be having these conversations right now, and we can't stop here. You know, things like these are just the start. There's a lot more that we all have to do for ourselves and for the people around us, and it's great that we're taking these first steps. And we want to say just to everyone here to continue having those conversations, continue taking the action to support yourself and to support the people around you, because as people have said, we're going to get through this and we'll get through it together. But, you know, we have to be there for ourselves and each other in order to do that. So once again, we wanted to thank all the panelists, thank all of the audience members for joining us today. Thank New You, of course, for helping us out. And with that, we wish you a very heartfelt good night. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Edward, before you go, are you trying to share something? Just because it says you're trying to share your screen, but it's I don't. Maybe I'm the only one who's seeing all black. I didn't know if there was something you wanted us to see.
Oh, yeah, we can. Yeah, this is the
Edward. Cut off your screen sharing. I have it screen shared.
All right.
All right, here
Oh, okay.
you'll be able to see the contact information for Mr. Cusin, Mrs. Baker, Dr. MC, and Mrs. O'Brien, as well as that for both HEAL and New You. So we hope that if you have something you would like to share, or that if you would like to come see the next set of webinars, we look forward to seeing you there, and we hope to hear from you about this. So
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so all resources mentioned in this panel will be put into the description of this video, of the replay, as well as the condensed version after this replay sometime soon. And with that, we are very grateful for you coming to listen to us today. And we are also very grateful for our wonderful, wonderful panelists. So with that, I hope that you all have a good night, get some rest, sleep more than 8 hours, you know, be well. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and be ready for school or work on Monday.
Thanks for the reminder.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
And
Mr.
with
Simon
that-
Cruz.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.